welcome the group.
Okay.
And then I'm going to do the intro, and then I'm going to hand it over to Mary.
To Mary, okay?
Copies of the presentation. So when she starts, you can pass those down, so they can, it's just copies of what she's going to show on the
Okay.
screen.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. It's good to see you all. How have you been? Everybody well? Any changes, any updates? Anyone would like to share?
Just missing part of my thumb, that's all.
A part of your what?
My thumb.
What happened?
I cut it on my table saw.
Oh, my goodness. Well, anybody with any good news?
It's 2022 and we're all here.
That's a good thing. And looks like we're healthy. Hopefully, you're doing well. So happy to see everybody and would like to welcome you this evening. It's good to see you, Scott. And for those of you, just a reminder, Scott, who is a selectman, is our liaison, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So each committee in town, well, there are multiple committees. So the selectmen are given, appointed to the committees and to serve as a resource and also to share information to the selectmen as well. So welcome and good to see you. And we have Becca, who is our assistant town administrator, who's been working with us. And we'll turn it over to you and have you say a few words.
Sure. Thank you, Virginia. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see everybody again. Thank you for being here. So tonight, I'm very excited to present to you the culmination of many months' work, which is the final presentation of their classification and compensation plan. I do want to start out by just thanking the board for your patience. I know that this has been a long process that initially started several years ago, and for many different reasons, it never got off the ground then. We signed a contract in summer of 2021 with the Collins Center to complete a classification and compensation plan review. And I am proud and happy to say that we are here with a final plan that staff has reviewed. It's been a very collaborative process with all the staff. They've had lots of opportunities to talk about their job descriptions. They've had interviews with staff from the Collins Center. They've had presentations from me of the final report that you're going to see here tonight. So I think overall, I'm just really happy with the way that this process played out. And I'm very excited to present to you all the results tonight.
Excellent. So we want to start by opening in the minutes, if you don't mind. And I want to thank you, Mary. I know it's been a long journey, so we are excited to hear what you have to share with us, and hopefully plenty of questions. And our goal is to resolve tonight and walk away with a finished product. Okay, so we'll start with the approval of the minutes from June 24th, which was 2021. Do I have a recommendation?
Make a motion to approve.
A second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the minutes from June 24th, 2021. Any questions or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion is carried. And thank you. Becca?
Sure. So before, I'm gonna hand it over to Mary in just 1 minute, and she's gonna give you a complete overview of the process that she went through with her staff, and talk a little bit about the final report. But I just want to hit a few highlights for you all. I think these are important takeaways before we dive into the process and the plan. So like I said, all the job descriptions have been reviewed by all the staff that hold the positions for the descriptions through several meetings back and forth with myself, the Collins Center staff, department heads. We are all on the same page about the final draft of those descriptions. So I'm very happy to say that everybody's on board with the format and the content of the job descriptions. I also want to say that on March 30th, I presented to the staff the final report. So that includes all of the classification information that you're going to review, the wage information that you've reviewed, and the job descriptions. I let them know of my intent to come here tonight with you all and ask you to officially adopt that plan and bless it at town meeting. So they are fully aware of my intentions. They were offered opportunities to speak with me ahead of time, and all I've heard is good things. So I think that speaks to the collaborative nature of the process, and the patience of the staff, because they've been waiting a long time to get this done too.
Has been a long time.
Yeah.
So,
The last thing I want to say, and I think this is an important takeaway that I think Mary will probably touch on, but as a result of this plan, no positions or people are grandfathered or quote-unquote red circled. And that's something that we really strive to do when we complete these plans. I think it's important. We don't want to call people out. We don't want to create separate plans for separate positions. The idea is to get everybody on the same page, in the same plan, and moving forward together. And I think that we achieved that. So I'm really happy to say that. So I'm going to stop talking.
Okay.
I'm going to turn on the projector, and then I'm going to hand it over to Mary.
All right, great. Well, first of all, what I'd love to do, I'll just take a minute to introduce myself, and then I'd love to hear from you all of why you're crazy enough to be on this committee, and, you know, what you bring to this table. Chuck, I've known for 30 years, so I know what he brings to this table.
Nothing.
We are in the Wayback Machine. So my name's Mary Icardi. I lead the HR practice for the Collins Center for Public Management. The center was created 13 years ago to help governments work better. I joined them 12 years ago. I was fortunate enough 18 years ago to quit my job as the HR director for the town of Watertown when we moved to Shrewsbury and had a third kid, and I couldn't afford daycare anymore. So I quit my job, and then I started doing part-time consulting. So now those kids are 22, 19, and 17, and college is looming. So I work almost full-time, if not more. But I've been able, we love the neighborhood, live in Shrewsbury. We do everything from class and compensations to executive recruitments to organizational studies, policy studies. So that's the HR practice. The Collins Center does many other things. You name it, they do it. But I'd love to just have you each introduce yourself so I know who I'm talking with.
so let's start with Chuck and work our way down, since you know Chuck.
Yes.
My name's Chuck Frankian. I'm retired now, but in my deep dark past, I was human resource director for a couple of communities. More than 20 years of doing the HR runaround with private companies and with public places, and a few other jobs in there as well. I've known Mary for, as she said, 30 years or so.
Thank you. Gigi?
I'm Guylaine Papetit. I've been in Northborough for 21 years now. My kids are a little bit older, so now I have time to dedicate to be more active in what's happening in my town. And I hope to contribute. I've been contributing to this board as a HR generalist specialist. Have many years experience, and I thought this was the proper committee for me to contribute to.
Great, nice to meet you.
I'm Lisa Studholm. I've known Virginia for 15 years. We used to work together at Raytheon. I've been in HR for 20 plus years, and I've lived in Northborough for almost 11, so I like being able to give back to the town.
Great, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
My name is Marcia Hill. I moved to Northborough in May. It'll be 13 years. And I was inspired during the pandemic to connect with my community rather than just sit in the house. So I started zooming in to the calls. My background is varied. I've got a law degree, heavy accounting business background. You name it, I've probably worked for that industry. And just want to be involved. That's the main reason, and be a part of the community.
Great, nice to meet you.
Well, I'm Virginia Sims George. I've been in this town probably 30, 40 years. I met my husband at work from doing HR. We both do HR work, and we were working on a project I met him and ended up in Northborough, and he was very, very active in the community and encouraged me to become active. And so I have 100 years plus of HR experience with different companies. I moved around, Minnesota, California, wherever, working as HR, finally to move here, and been on the HR, on the personnel board here for a few years. I don't know how many, but I really love Northborough. I've been here and been active in so many different things that I just feel that we need to continue to contribute to make this the community that it is, has been, and hopefully will continue to be. And so here I am.
Well, that's great. Thank you all so much for being willing to serve. Usually it's the busiest people who do the most volunteering, so I know you're busy. And I will say, dovetailing on what you said, is that this project and the work, I have to say, at the helm was Becca. It's a big endeavor to do the entire town. Oftentimes municipalities do one department, one union, but really for true comprehensive classification, you've got to do the whole thing. Morale is always an issue in these projects, and so the fact that I don't think anybody's sitting here to complain, and they all know the details, which is great. So and really, I would love to freeze frame this town when we work with other towns, because it really worked well. The communication outwardly, we had the orientations in this room. We were able to come in person. People could. Did we do a Zoom? We did a Zoom.
We did a Zoom.
And we did a Zoom and recorded it for people who weren't comfortable coming in person. And your comment, Marcia, about being at home with Zoom. I'm in HR. I need to be out. I'm like, I'm in Shrewsbury. I'm like, I'll come to the meeting. So it's really been great. The organization, Becca's technology skills of having us have shared folders, and many of our clients don't have that sophistication. So it's really been a wonderful process. So what I'd like to do is just briefly go through the slideshow that we gave at the orientation. So you're going to see what the employees saw back in the beginning, which was probably September, right? I don't remember.
It was September.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Mary, before you go, and I will tell you that Chuck and I were on the study before. We go back a long ways. So
I heard about you. Don't worry.
Okay.
And many of the employees were on a previous study.
Yes.
And sometimes there's a hangover from some of those things if they were never implemented, or it didn't go well, or was perceived to be unfair. I like to say we want a fair and equitable system, but fair is not always equal, and equal is not always fair.
That's true.
So and oftentimes people say, well, I know what he does, and my job is this. By having it done in a comprehensive way, you really eliminate some of that. And by having it be from an outside firm, too many municipalities try to do this themselves, and you just can't take your lenses off of what you're looking at. So, all right, so this is who we are. Now, what is it? You all are professionals. With all due respect to select board members, you all have an HR viewpoint, so you kind of know where classification is. So I'm going to go quickly through this. It really is about current position descriptions. It's about your current compensation schedules, a review of the classification grades or groupings, a review of the internal equity of positions, and quite frankly, that's the most important. You can have a policy on pay and where you want to be in the market, but if your employees know that the internal system is fair, it does help with those justice issues. A market survey to evaluate the wages, we make sure that the job descriptions are compliant with the ADA. If we find that there should be a Fair Labor Standards Act issue, we highlight those. One thing about having, and a recommendation for an equitable compensation system, one thing about having an objective study be done, is that we actually end up dealing with the Mass Pay Equity Act, because we're evaluating positions, not genders in positions. So, the benefits of doing the study, you get accurate position descriptions, you can use those for employee evaluation. They're not the only part when you manage employees, but it's important to have an accurate job description. Certainly in recruitment, if we don't advertise our jobs, it's hard enough to get good people. Let's make sure that it's accurate. And we're objective, and we put in the ADA information, we deal with pay equity. So it's all around good news to do a job description. There you go. Now, most important, and this is what we focus on in the orientation, what is the classification and compensation not? It's not an upgrade study or a reclass study. So often we have employees say, well, we're gonna get upgraded or we're gonna have a reclass. We view it as right sizing. We wanna make sure that it's appropriate. It's not a performance evaluation. It has nothing to do with the person holding the job, which is awfully hard. You've got some long-serving people, and they're like, when I was even in Watertown for 8.5 years, I didn't say I held the job of HR director. I was the HR director, and I, take pride in what my job was. And I take it personally when somebody, criticizes the work that's done. We're at work an awful lot of hours in our day. And so it's hard to remove people from that idea. It's not a staffing level study. How many staff do you need? And it's certainly not how many hours a position should be assigned. Oftentimes when we meet with employees, they're like, well, if I could only work 40 hours, it would be so much better. Yeah, we're evaluating the duties, whether you're doing them 5 hours a week or 50 hours a week. So our methodology was, we did the orientations. You have in your packet the 8-page questionnaire that was sent out to everybody. Even in the 13 years, 12 years I've been doing this with the Collins Center, we've gone from paper to PDF fillable. So for those who have access to a computer, it's much easier. It's easier to collect the data. Now we can scan things. We're not double-sided copying. It's really been terrific. Everybody was offered an interview. We did mostly individual interviews. There were a few group interviews, and a group could be 2 people. For example, 2 laborers in the Public Works Department in the same job, in the same division, didn't need an individual interview. And in those situations, we worked directly with the department heads. So we didn't do an awful lot of group interviews, but we did a few. And that's just operationally makes sense.
Did any people not participate in
Everybody, some said they didn't need an interview, and I don't remember which ones. Oftentimes, if it's a very discrete position, like we certainly interviewed the building inspector, but not the wiring inspector.
Okay.
It's very statutory, it's code-based, they're like, my job. And the job description for electrical inspector or wire inspector should really be the same across municipalities. It's the same code. But we certainly met with the building inspector, who I knew as a child, by the way.
So, sorry, I didn't ask you, are you okay for interruptions if people have
Anytime, jump right in.
questions? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So what we did after, we call it a few bites at the apple. We do an orientation, we get a questionnaire, we do an interview, then we did draft descriptions. Every employee and supervisor saw the draft descriptions. That was coordinated through Becca. Edits and comments by employees and supervisors were incorporated as need be. I don't even remember any edits that we didn't incorporate. Few and far between. Sometimes there's standard language. And then we finalized the position description. We then evaluate, once we finalize the positions, we evaluate them based on a rating system. You've got the rating system in your packet. I'm not going to bore you. But to rate a position, you're really evaluating the key characteristics which are listed here. Are they a supervisor? How closely are they supervised? Are they independent in an office or in a department? what is the required, not what education they have, but what is required for the job. On the questionnaire, we have in big bold letters, fill this out as if you're writing this for the next person who gets the job. And that's hard, you know. Judgment, complexity, who are your customers internally, externally, what is the work environment? Public works environment would be much different than an office environment. You get more points if you have to be out climbing in ditches, you know. But those positions sometimes don't have the degree requirement. So the points offset it. And it's a system that has been validated years and decades ago. It's not a random sort of give me a rank of 1 to 5. So as you look through the materials, you can see that. Once we do that, we group the positions into grades, which says, okay, we've determined these positions should be in the same grade. We then use those grades to do, so we do a market survey, and what's interesting is people say, well, we want it to be a comparable municipality. We don't say that. It's a market survey. It's who's going to drive from their house to here to come to work. That's your labor market. So often municipalities want to say, we want to find a municipality with the same population, the same budget, the same EQV. Those are all wonderful standard bearers of comparing, but you could have the exact same thing and that town could be on the Cape. Well, what good is that for you, for the market, or out in Western Massachusetts? You know, so, and we really, you see in the report, we had a very strong response. Now, we did include some comparable municipalities that the town has historically used. So yours was a bit of a blend. We had some comparables and we had some market. But when you have that many municipalities in there, the averages and the means really take out any indications that would show an outlier. We convert everything to hourly wages, so we're doing comparisons. Some municipalities now have different hours. Some are 32, some are 35, 37, 40. So we convert everything to an hourly rate, so we're evaluating apples to apples. We use both the average and the median. The median takes out the outliers, but sometimes the average can skew it with the outliers. So we use both to evaluate, and when you see the survey results, you'll see that we list both. Then what we do is, based on the groupings with the salary data, it's mostly mathematical, but some a little bit of an art. We call it a science, but an art. We determine what the ranges should be. And we also take a look at your existing pay schedules towards the survey to see, is there a reason if they're very different? Now, what we found, so then we coalesce the data and say, this is our recommended pay ranges. And then what I did is I walked through the questionnaire, so this was the orientation. And we talked about frequently asked questions. The town will not cut your pay. The town made a commitment to that. People get nervous around these things, you know. Oh, what am I worth? And all, you know, what are they gonna pay me? And they don't like me, they're gonna cut my pay. So again, we talked about, this is my favorite part. We only recommend. If you don't like it, you can blame, you know, somebody else. And then we talked about the comparability. So that is, I'm done with that, yeah. So that's the brief overview of the process. So I thought what I would do is just flip you through the report, which is this one, looks like this. And of course, Becca, you put a cover on something that looked similar, right? Or you put the report in?
Yeah.
This one. It's like the fourth section of,
It's right after my memo.
right after the memo. And really all you have to do is read Becca's memo. She's one of the most organized people I've ever met. I have an extra copy. Do you want it?
You want it?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank
you.
So really what we do is, I've already covered most of this in the PowerPoint. When you start on page 2, we show you what we did. We developed the new job descriptions, we evaluated the positions, and we conducted a survey. Those are the 3 big points. It gives you data on the questionnaire. Not many municipalities pass out the questionnaire, so this is just a summary of what's on the questionnaire, what we asked people. And you can see that the questions align with the sections on the job description. So it's very systematic, and you'll get a good sense of that. We rated, this is a repeat of the slide on page 3, how we rated the positions and how we evaluated them. These are the characteristics that we evaluate, and it's based on the questionnaire and the interview. And the reason we really value the interview is that everybody writes differently. Everybody fills out a form differently. We had some who wanted to have it be a 12-page questionnaire. Some are more. Some were lucky if we got one-word answers, So the interview is our opportunity to either, pull things out or narrow them down. So that's why we feel really confident when we do a job description that it's accurate. So what you'll see starting on page 4 is our recommended structure. We came up with recommending 9 grades, and as I said, the point factors that applied informed which positions should be grouped with which positions. So, and it makes sense. If you look on page 4 and you start at grade 9, clearly these are your broad cabinet level positions. And then grade 8 and grade 7, for the most part, are your department heads. Scope and complexity informs the nuances between some of these. So, the larger departments with more staff, or even a smaller position, less staff but broader responsibility. So you'll see it kind of makes sense when you look at these. Some towns have many more levels of department heads. We find in most cases that's not really accurate, because your managers have the same responsibility but for different things. It's for budgets. Now some sizes of departments are smaller and warrant something different, but you don't see, I'm doing a project with a town, they have 27 grades and 60 employees. So we do a little bit more banding, and that helps with, the morale issues too. And it's informed by the salary and the market survey. So you can see the groupings going through, and that's all based on their questionnaires. They all were able to verify that their job descriptions were accurate, which then reinforces the grouping. So we feel very comfortable and are really pleased. One thing I will point out, you will see, and Becca's memo referred to it, we equalize some of the titles that you have. You can see the 3rd column is a title change or recommendation. You have what's called a health agent. Agent almost indicates it's not a department head. So we're recommending that you change it to director. Same with planner, planning director. Even though they may be a smaller department, they really are a department head. And so you'll see that. We recommend you change the title of dog officer. That's a little dated. And there is and I know Becca's memo touched on it, in your cable TV, you lumped everybody who wasn't the director into one title. There really is one position that is at least the work leader and supervisor of the programming. So we're recommending that position, that's one of the few that actually was, quote, upgraded, like changed in the nature of the work. So we do recommend that. And we did try to equalize the administrative positions. The titles are, I'm being recorded, wackadoo. So you'll see in the different grades, if they were grade 3, we said they should be administrative assistants. If they were grade 2s, they are department assistants. We've recommended you get away from the financial assistant and the office assistant title. Just to equalize them across grades. And that will help you in the future as you do touch-based surveys in a few years. You won't need to deal with the structure, but you might want to do a market survey to make sure you're keeping up. And by equalizing the titles, you'll be much better served. What we did, and it goes into what we came up with, and the way we came up with the salary ranges, we grouped the positions, we looked at the current pay, and we looked at the market pay, and came up with these recommendations. And as Becca mentioned, there is nobody, I believe, that was outside of a range, and that always makes us happy when that happens that way. Oh, and you can see on page 6, all of the municipalities, starting with Ashland, that were used: Ashland, Auburn, Bellingham, Boylston, Grafton, Holden, Holliston, Hopkinton, Hudson, Marlborough, Medfield, Medway, Millbury, Norfolk, Northbridge, Shrewsbury, Southborough, Walpole, Wayland, Westborough, and West Boylston. Whew. The only one we asked for data for, which is one that the town has used as a comparable in the past, and we just couldn't get them to respond, was the town of Foxborough. They're one of your comparables, not in your direct region, so I'm not worried about that. It wasn't gonna change the numbers. So that's how we came up with the ranges. One thing I wanna say about the market survey is, let's jump to the salary survey summary on page 8. So you'll see each position that we had enough data to include. Some positions didn't have 3 data points, so they were not included. You can't do an average or a median with 3 data points. So we didn't have every single title have more than 3 municipalities have that, but we had enough of the other positions in that grade to come up with salary data. So you'll see the parentheses in the last 2 columns. So you'll see we've got, Northborough minus the average. A positive number means that that position is within or above that average. What I want to make sure that people don't think is a positive number means you're overpaid. That means you're in the market.
In the market.
So I just want, because some people say, oh, well, they're overpaid. No, they're not. They're in the market or above the market average or median. So just remember that. It's the middle of the market are these numbers. So you'll see, though, some of them are fairly significant. Now, on some, you have to realize, and often you see this with chiefs, this is base pay, and sometimes it includes education, and some municipalities are terrible in the way they reflect chief pay. So we always look at that with a little bit of a grain of salt, and most of those positions either have contracts or they're known as a double chief. They get paid twice the top maximum of a firefighter or a police officer. So do not be dismayed if you see that. However, some of them are, and again, your health agent might be low because they're an agent, not a director. So, but if you see $2, if somebody works 40 hours a week, right? That's over $4,000. You can say it's only $2. Well, that's $4,000, So then when you look at, so you get the first few pages of that's based on your minimum. And then you look at the next pages that start on page, so you can see we've got very solid data here that starts on page 12. There are fewer negative numbers. What that tells us is your minimum is too low, but your maximum is okay. Your maximum is well within the range for most of these positions. So this is a good thing that, you might have a few that are under the market. Again, I discount police and fire for that other reason. It's very hard to get those data. So you'll see that the numbers are much smaller too in the maximum, 87 cents. Well, that's barely a difference, you know. And sometimes you'll see the average is positive and the median is negative, or vice versa. That tells you there's an outlier someplace. So we look at all of that and we coalesce that data and say, what makes the most sense for those positions in that range? So you'll see that your maximum pay is either within the market, and some are slightly above. But again, that doesn't mean it's overpaid. So I just don't want you to, I don't want you to think that. It's the way that it's reflected. Now, some are gonna be on the higher end of the market, but there's also reasons for that. We don't do a full job description comparison of 68 positions. It gets 68 job descriptions from every town. Some of it is influenced by titles having different responsibility. You could have a highway supervisor and a public works director. They may answer differently and the scopes might be different. Public works could be highway, parks, rec, water, sewer, you know, so, but it's enough data to make us feel very comfortable with how things laid. So I wouldn't want to say, you know, your data collector, which is on page 14, is way above. Data collector is one of those titles that can mean assistant director sometimes. It can mean, you know, what yours means, and sometimes it's the assistant assessor in the office. So assessing is one that can be tricky. So I just wanted to clarify those numbers. That's it for the presentation. So I can answer any questions. Now what we don't bore you with is the town does have the raw data that all of the municipalities submitted, that we did the work from, you know, and so this is a summary of the survey. We're not giving you all of those columns. You're gonna make yourself crazy. And the reason we do a summary, quite frankly, is so that people aren't tempted to cherry pick. Oh, this one is this one, and I'm $2 over, and this one's only $1.50 under, and we really have to look at the system and the groupings. So, you know, we use all of that, but there's no need to put that in the report. You've got the summary. It's about the universe that you're dealing with. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, super. Excellent presentation.
Well, thank you.
Very much. I'll open it up for discussion and questions.
So you said that no one was over the survey ranges. Are there people that we should be concerned about being sort of at the top of their ranges?
You have a few that are at the top,
Okay.
but if they're at the top, many things it could be longevity.
Yeah.
It could be a market correction, you know, so
Okay,
I
so
wouldn't overly worry about people at the top. What I'm thrilled about is that you didn't have many that were way below and they needed to be a big jump to the first one.
That was
you
my
know.
next question.
Yeah. I think there were a few that were under the range that was recommended. And you can see on the survey what the current range is and what the recommended range. It's a shift on every grouping, because your minimum pay was too low, and that tells me you're hiring people above the minimum and need to, you know, so that is an indicator. You know, have you lost people to other municipalities? That tells you you need a shift in your schedule, and that the world is very competitive right now. So, you know, so that's the thing. People at the maximum or position, again, it's the position, not the people.
Correct.
That's why many towns have a longevity program that kicks in at the end of a plan. So,
Thank you.
Chuck?
What's the financial impact of if we
it costs you nothing. No. We're not hired to do that, but I'm guessing that.
Well, that question probably goes to.
Yeah, I'm guessing somebody at the table knows the answer to that, because she wouldn't let me come here without it.
So I can speak to the merit impact, which is the cost come January 1 for people that qualify for merit as a result of the upgrading of the classification. I cannot speak to COLA, because as you all know, COLA is based on the average of the union contracts, which at this time, I don't have that figure for you. But I can tell you that based on the merit, if this plan is adopted as it's presented, the total merit cost for NEMA and non-union, so that includes the NEMA bargaining groups who are in this plan, as well as non-union, it'll be approximately $60,000. That's the impact.
And as all the various and assorted financial committees keeled over and.
Well, I don't, if you've, a budget is set, ready to go to town meeting. The financial planning and appropriations committees are wrapping up their meetings this week, I believe. Right now, because all of the union contracts are unsettled, the funds for those contracts to be settled is being held in the personnel board account, as we do in contract years where we're unsettled ahead of town meeting. These numbers are incorporated in that dollar figure.
Okay.
So if it's adopted at town meeting as presented, we have the
There's
funding to
funds
implement
do
it.
this. Okay,
Exactly.
great.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Becca, the only thing I would say on that was, if you didn't adopt that, is this new cost or total cost?
So this is new cost. So a lot of, as you all know, a lot of our staff are maxed because we have people who have been here for a long time, a lot of longevity. Part of this plan is, it's been over 15 years since we've done a full, comprehensive look at our plan. And so what's happening is, while everyone is within the plan and the range that we're proposing, what's happening is people's earning potential is shifting up, right? So they're at the max now, but the range is going like this. So those people who previously didn't qualify for merit because they were maxed out, they're going to qualify for a year or two because of the shifting of the ranges, which for retention purposes in this market is incredibly important for us, incredibly important.
Super. Thank you.
I thought it was time
Anyone else?
that we did this, so I'm glad we did.
Yeah.
Chuck, you have to speak up a little bit. We're being,
Sorry.
please.
I had the sense that we were needing to do this, and apparently my sense was right, so I'm glad we were able to do this whole thing.
Super. Thank you. Anyone else?
Nuts
Anyone
and
else?
bolts question. This booklet, first time I've seen it, so this is the full classification that we need to use if, tomorrow a new job comes up and we're going to grade it, or what
Yes.
is this versus?
So you have the manual.
Yeah. I want to ask a few questions on the manual itself.
Okay, yeah.
Because when I looked at it, I didn't see it flow well for me. So, and I saw it being a little different. Can you walk us through the process?
Sure.
If we had someone had requested that their job be evaluated.
Sure.
So-
You would do the same thing. What you would do, I would suggest, there's two ways to do that. First, I would start with, here's your job description that was approved in 2022. Okay? Now, sometimes it's a different person because it's 4 years from now, and it's not the person who signed off on the job description, but the department head and the system should be in place. So that becomes a management issue of why would it be different? So that's a separate matter. So what you want to do is you want to have somebody say what's different in their job description than what's different with the duties they're doing now that's not in their job description. Sometimes I'm doing more. Well, more is not higher. And, more is volume. What is a new responsibility? Are you newly a supervisor? Are you newly these things? So you want to ask them twofold. What is different about the job description? And if you really have questions, have them fill out a questionnaire. Okay?
So the first step would be to complete the questionnaire.
For efficiency, I would have them do both. I'm imagining the process. I would say, here's your existing job description. Tell us where it's wrong.
Okay.
This questionnaire follows the job description, so it may be redundant. Because, you know, if they're just saying their duties have changed, filling this questionnaire, maybe you use a few pages of this. It really does depend on what somebody is, quote, claiming is the difference. So you've got 2 bites at that apple. If you're trying to be efficient, have them fill out a questionnaire. But if they're not saying the degree requirements are different, why make them fill that out? You know, so I would focus on the existing job description, particularly if it's only a few years out.
So they would take this position classification, and they would answer the question, essential functions, et cetera, okay? Then once they do that, then what's the next step? So you also have the evaluation position, you know, supervisor required, and the numbers there. How does that tie into the questionnaire?
So what you do, it's a point factor system manual, and it's not a manual we publish. That's certainly for your use in the future. It's not a published manual. That is our working document.
Okay.
So what we do is we create a spreadsheet, and we list every position, and we list the 14 factors across the top. And what you see is in supervision required. Go to page 1.
Yep.
Supervision required. So, and you read the first degree, okay? And it says something like, work is routine, you know, and then when you get to supervision required at 4, it's work is independent, the boss is told only as needed. I haven't quite memorized the manual after all these years, but I do know the points. So what would happen is, if I'm a receptionist underneath the hammer of somebody, I'm gonna get the points to my job assigned for degree number 1. And that happens with each of the categories. Then you have a total point score. That's what I'm talking about when we say we group the position by points. Department heads, as a rule, are in the 500-point range. A bachelor's degree is 60 points. A master's degree is 80 points. 5 years of experience is maybe 70, maybe 50. Some of the categories are weighted differently. Working out in the field is more points than working in an office. So what we do is objectively apply that rating manual to the approved job descriptions, which is why it's important to get those job descriptions signed off on, so that you're not having somebody say, well, I should be that one. Well, no, you said the job description was accurate, you know, so we don't do the ratings ahead of time. So that's how it works. So it's based on a spreadsheet. I can, you know, it's all those, so it goes across the top. It's weighted. You'll see the degrees at each one of those. So first degree, we have a spreadsheet. If I put in 1, it populates the points, you know, and supervision exercised. There's 3 levels of supervision. Well, 4. You're not a supervisor. You're a work leader, which might be something like a working supervisor or a work leader. A supervisor could be, say you're in the public, you're in I'm going to use Shrewsbury, for example. I don't like to use examples here because people think I talk about them. So in Shrewsbury, where I live, in the town accountant's office, there's a town accountant, assistant town accountant, and 4 accounts payable. Particularly, we see this more when larger departments. So there might be an office manager who is a work leader. The assistant accountant could be a supervisor, but the town accountant or the finance director is the manager. So there's manager, supervisor, work leader, not at all. Now, some people say they are a supervisor of interns, of volunteers. That's not what we're talking about. When we talk about supervisor, it means responsible for participating in the hiring, the discipline, the performance appraisal. So there are people who do some work leading, we put that in the essential functions that they do. So that's kind of a stereotypical example of the three levels is DPW superintendent, highway supervisor, and working for person.
Yes.
I want to follow up on a question previously asked by Chuck. If someone approached us tomorrow, has this been voted on, ratified, that we would use this classification manual?
That's what we're gonna
That's
do
what
tonight.
we're doing
Hopefully you'll do that tonight. But the
No,
but the
I
plan-
just wasn't,
The actual plan, like the classification plan has to be adopted by town meeting. That's it,
so
that's the process.
is that
So-
the true effective
Yeah, the
date?
structure, the grades that the positions fall into. So until town meeting votes, nothing is final.
And we still would reference,
We would
the
still
other one.
reference our existing structure, correct?
okay.
And certainly town meeting doesn't approve the rating manual. They're going to approve the grid.
Yeah, in the packet I gave you,
I
the
have
last is the personnel bylaw, that's what goes to town meeting, it just has the positions and the grades and then the salary scale, that's it.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No.
Hearing none?
Will we, as the board, get a copy of, each of us get a copy of the rating manual and the current job descriptions as you guys have?
Well, you have I sent you the manual
Yeah.
as part of the packet, it was included in the,
email.
it was a long packet.
I printed it out by mistake.
You can send it to you, I can send it to you,
Yeah.
so you have it. I didn't want to burden you with copies of all of our job descriptions. I am happy to provide them if you want to review them. I thought the important thing I wanted to convey to you tonight is that every staff person has seen their job description, gone through multiple iterations of it with the manager, with the Collins Center staff, with me. It took a lot of back and forth, but ultimately, everybody has blessed their final job description. And I felt like that was the message I wanted to convey tonight.
That's extremely important.
Yeah.
So,
We've had
Yep, I know.
discussions over the years that, well, this doesn't really mean that, this means something else, and, I'm God's right hand and all that kind of stuff, and
Every one of your employees is that. Don't you forget it.
I understand that.
You are so well served by dedicated fools in this town. You are really, truly fortunate. We have loved meeting each and every, that's the best part of my job, meeting people.
and we do know that.
Yeah.
We do know that. So thank you for echoing that, because all of us deal with the people here, and they're all fabulous and helpful. So this time, I'm going to, did you have your hand up, Julie?
Oh, thank you. Actually, this really isn't specifically to this, but I'm wondering, as a result of the pandemic, is there going to be a change in some of the job descriptions came up in the work market? And I'm thinking, like technology or health or something like that.
Well, so we did this, we went through this process in the pandemic, right? So we were living the effects of it, being on Zoom, et cetera. So those things certainly factored into the interviews that staff had with the Collins Center. I think probably the biggest indicator we see for that, for me at least, is the change in title from health director. I think when you look at what's happened to health departments with the pandemic, they have just like catapulted into the limelight. And the market right now, for health directors, it's incredibly challenging to recruit and retain. And so that was, it was an important thing for us to change that title to reflect the importance of that role. And certainly as a result of that, there were some small modifications to the job description to reflect sort of the reality and the lived experience of staff through the pandemic. IT, you want to be careful because you don't want to be too much in the moment, because these job descriptions have to evolve, they have to stay relevant over time. So we're not, God willing, always going to be in a pandemic, but we do want, to the best of our ability, to reflect long-lasting changes in jobs. And so that's sort of the importance of doing this whole project all at once, right? You look at the whole thing together. You're not looking at just one piece of the puzzle, you're looking at the whole puzzle. And that's, you know, that's why it was so important for us to get this project done. So I think the answer to your question is kind of yes and no, maybe? A little bit yes, a little bit no, but certainly, I think in everything that we do now, the pandemic is, you know, weighs on us in some way, in the way that it's either changed the way we live interpersonal lives or professional lives, so I don't think there's any denying the impact of that, certainly.
I will now, thank you very much. I will entertain a motion from the committee, please.
So I move that the board vote to recommend the proposed changes to the classification and compensation plan as set forth in the draft consolidated personnel bylaw for the 2022 annual town meeting as presented, and to allow the chair to work with staff to finalize the language for town council's recommendations.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the proposed changes to the classification and compensation plan as set forth in the draft consolidated personnel bylaw for the 2022 annual town meeting as presented, and to allow the chair to work with staff to finalize the language for town council's recommendations. It's properly moved by Lisa, seconded by Chuck. Because it's financial implications, I'm going to do a roll call for Martha. Aye. Lisa?
Aye.
Gigi?
Aye.
Chuck?
Aye.
Virginia? Aye. The motion is carried.
Thank you all, I appreciate it, and thank you so much for your patience. I know that this has been a long time coming for this board, and I'm really happy that we were able to get it done.
So, on behalf of the committee, we'd like to thank you and Mary and your team for the work. It has been a long time coming, but it was worth the wait. And to know that our employees will be well taken care of and that they're happy with the results, I think that speaks volumes. So thank you very much. Any other things that need to come before this body? If not, I will entertain a motion to retire.
Make a motion to adjourn?
I second that motion.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we adjourn by Chuck, seconded by Marsha. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion is carried. Thanks. Great job.